You're correcting your English conversation students wrong. It's the biggest mistake teachers make, and in trying to improve it, you could actually be making it worse. I'm Will from Enchanted ESL, and this is the third video in a series about helping you give the best English conversation classes. I have many conversation lessons with kids, teenagers and adults, and correction technique is something I've always worried about. Am I correcting enough? How can I do it without hurting their confidence? It seems like an easy job. Listen to your students and correct them when they make a mistake. Great. Well, no. The reality is much more complex. Take this sentence, for example. Yesterday, I go to eat pizza with my friend who have got 2 new cats. Can you spot the 3 mistakes? Imagine a student says this to you. Your job is to correct their mistakes. So first it should be went instead of go. Second, it should be has instead of have. Or should it? Did the student mean friends instead of friend? And the final mistake, new instead of news. Your student asks why there's no S on the adjective. Just in this one sentence, there are 3 things to think about. And if you correct them all, a couple of things will happen and neither are good. First, the conversation will just come to a standstill. It could take several minutes to explain the grammar behind the mistakes. And even if you correct them without explaining in great detail, it disrupts the flow of speech. Second, your student will get overwhelmed. 3 things to change in one single sentence is a lot. It's cognitive overload. And plus, if they got 3 mistakes in one sentence, are they actually any good at English? You might see them lose confidence. Imagine you had a conversation with someone who pointed out 2 or 3 things wrong in every sentence that you said. How would you feel about opening your mouth to say anything more? Overcorrection is by far the biggest issue in conversation classes. But how else should we do it? Well, come with me for the rest of the video and I'll show you how less is more is a great philosophy and show you some specific techniques that you can implement right away. Instead of giving a barrage of corrections, we need to find what is most important to focus on. Unless your students are very, very advanced, there are parts of English that are just completely beyond them at this point. So we need to find the level that they're operating at and target that. It doesn't matter if they mess up a few modal perfects if they're still trying to master the order of words in a sentence. Before correcting anything, we need to establish their general level of English and then identify any gaps in their language. A lot of my students struggle with 1 or 2 things in particular. That could be past tense verbs or mixing up personal pronouns, he or she. So those are the first few things I target. I don't worry about the rest of the language, I'm just purely focused on getting that right first. You can even create a specific focus for each session, a weakness you've identified or something that's likely to come up in the conversation activity you're doing. Another thing to take into account is your student's personality. How do they respond to corrections? It's tough to be told that you're wrong. Personally, I hate it. Some students are much better than others at accepting criticism. For everyone, you need to find the tolerance level, how far you can push them before they close up and get stressed. At first you might cross that line, but later you know where it is and you can avoid going too far. These 2 things, focusing on what's most important and knowing your student's personality, will help the conversation flow much smoother and they'll gain in confidence. And my motto is that confidence comes before perfection. Alright, now we know what we want to correct. How do we do it? What do we say? And when do we say it? Here are my 7 key practices. Number 1, try not to interrupt. Corrections are best done when students have finished what they're saying rather than in the middle. Otherwise they'll lose their train of thought and struggle to get to the end of the sentence. Or, number 2, use non-verbal cues to identify common errors. For example, a thumb point back over the shoulder is a great way of telling a student they've made a mistake with a past tense verb. Facial expressions are another good way of letting students know something's wrong. And this leads to number 3. Highlight the mistake and give students an opportunity to correct it themselves. Often they know how to fix the error, they just haven't realised they're doing it. If you just give them the answer, then they don't make that little bit of mental effort to make a connection in their mind. Number 4 is identify the mistakes with a kind and curious manner. My 2 favourite ways of doing this are first, repeating what they say with a questioning tone. Yesterday morning I go to the park? Or repeat what they said up until the mistake and let them complete it. For example, yesterday morning I, and then they can say, went to the park. Number 5, don't force them to repeat the whole corrected sentence. Most students hate doing this, and if they do want to, then they'll do it on their own without you making them. Number 6. When you've got more complex mistakes, like word order being completely wrong or big chunks that should be worded differently, you can just say the correct sentence afterwards. Instead of chopping up their sentence, you just model the right form. Then you're confirming their idea and they can see how to do it for next time. If you're finding the video useful, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button. It helps this video spread to many more amazing teachers like you. Number 7, avoid words like no, that's wrong, or incorrect. For many people, including me, those are trigger words that immediately create resistance. Instead, use language like a better word is, or that should be, because negative criticism can hurt quite a lot. And that leads to something much bigger. The entire attitude we take to correcting conversation. We feel we have to identify everything that's wrong and focus on that. But what about the things that are right? Do we just forget about them? I would argue that it's as important, if not more, to give positive feedback about things that are right than it is to give negative feedback about errors. I'm not suggesting you praise every correct word, but when a student uses some difficult language correctly, let them know. Positive reinforcement is a powerful thing. Plus, if you share the correction focus that we established earlier with your student, you can point out when they get it right. So with my students who struggle with past tense verbs, I'll tell them at the start of the session that that's what we're focusing on. When they get it wrong, the thumb back over the shoulder, but when they get it right, thumbs up. And these two gestures are fantastic because they don't break the flow of conversation. As a result, they can direct a little bit of their attention towards that particular focus, and they'll want to try and get more thumbs up than thumbs back. And you can be sure that doing this, you'll see some rapid progress. Correction technique is just one of the things that English teachers get wrong in conversation classes. There are plenty more, and some of them are quite surprising. Find out the mistakes you might be making in the next video in this series, which is right here. But for now, I've been Will from Enchanted ESL, wishing you all the joy and success in your teaching. See ya!